So the story I'm going to tell you about today is a story that I tell a lot of people. It involves my experience as a person with... Wait, before I tell you, is anybody here really good at an overdramatic gasp of horror? Ooh, I like that. All right. So when I give you the sign, you give me your best overdramatic gasp of horror. Everybody feel free to join in. I'm speaking with you today, and I'm going to tell you some stories about my experience as somebody with depression. Thank you. I stole that from a different speaker. I liked it. So I'm up here today talking to you about my experience with depression, partly, but that's also not my only experience. But I first started to figure this out when I was very young, when I was about 13 years old at the time. I didn't know what was happening to me. I didn't know that it had this label called depression. I didn't know that these feelings of confusion and tension and anger and energy inside me were anxiety. They were what would become my anxiety disorder. At least so I was told. This was most prominent to me, I think, when I was 15. I was walking over an overpass in my hometown in Sydney, Nova Scotia one night. Any Nova Scotians, Maritimers at all? Yeah, a couple of, yeah. You can always hear the Maritimers. They're always in the back. They're probably, what is it? It's like 7:30, so they're probably drunk by now. Yeah, right? No. Hey, they're my people. I can say that. Anyway, I was 15. I was walking over this overpass in my hometown. I don't remember what happened before that, but I knew that my mind was running, racing, spinning all around me, and I knew that I couldn't do this again. I had already been here enough times. It had already worn me down, and I had to get out. Now, fortunately, I had been practicing. At least in my mind, it was fortunate. I had been practicing with a number of my suicide attempts in the past, but this time I knew how to get it right. I had planned it out already. So I was walking over this overpass in my hometown, and some of you may have heard this before. I came to the railing. It was past midnight at the time. I selected the spot carefully. I had to go next to a lamp post that was there, so I could hold it as I climbed up over the 4 rungs of the railing and then climb back down the other side. I needed the lamp post next to me because I didn't want to slip and fall by accident. It seemed like a good idea at the time, right? And it couldn't be an accident this time. Because one of the worst things you can ever experience when you're depressed, anxious, suicidal, is that you can't complete your own suicide attempt. So this time it had to be more intentional. I climbed up over, I held on with my heels on the concrete. I went back there recently to that spot, just a few weeks ago actually. I looked down over the railing at that place that I stood 12 years ago. And I didn't realize how small that space, that strip of concrete was that my heels were on. An inch, maybe an inch and a half. I stood like that on the railing with my hands behind me, and I could feel the cold rain under my fingertips. And before too long, somebody came up behind me, a man's voice. I didn't know where he came from, but when I heard him, he didn't try to stop me. He didn't tell me any magic words or tell me not to jump. He didn't tell me that I was special or that tomorrow was another day, which, of course, if you're depressed and suicidal, that's part of the problem. Tomorrow is another day. Anyway. He didn't tell me any of that. He just talked to me. He talked to me like a fellow Maritimer. If it had been noon instead of midnight, walking across an overpass in my hometown. But before too long, after talking to him for a while, I started to notice that there were flashing lights to my right and to my left. I looked to either side, and I couldn't turn all the way around, so I had never actually seen that man's face. If I had have turned around, I would have fallen by accident. It wouldn't have been a jump. But when I turned to as far as I could to the sides, I saw the police cars, and I saw the corner of an ambulance to my left. I saw that they had barricaded either side of the street. There were people gathered at either ends of the barricades, and one young man in particular with his group of friends. He shouted out to me, he screamed, it seemed like, for me to jump. He said that I was a coward. It was at that moment that I realized that That was the only validation left that I needed for this decision that I had thought that I had already made. So I let go of the railing, and as I did, I immediately started to fall forward. I remember how free I felt, finally free. These people around me wouldn't have this power over me anymore. My family wouldn't be subjected to a lifetime of being related to that crazy person. I thought I was doing them a favor. But most of all, I just wanted the pain inside me to end. But as I started to fall forward, that man who was standing behind me, I remember he was wearing a light brown jacket, wrapped his arms around my chest. I felt a hand grab the back of my jacket, and they pulled me over the railing. I was loaded into the ambulance, and I never saw the man again. That is, until a few weeks ago. A few weeks ago, I asked for people's help in finding this stranger who had saved my life that night, who had literally reached out and pulled me back from the edge. Well, it didn't take very long. Within a couple of hours, his former roommate, the one he was living with at the time, contacted me on Twitter. By the way, it's at Mark Henick if you want to follow me on Twitter. Sorry. Before too long, he contacted me on Twitter, and he said, "I think I know who you're talking about." I lived with him at the time. And in fact, I showed him your TED Talk about a week ago, and he's been looking for you too. Not long after that, his soon-to-be brother-in-law contacted me as well, and by the end of that day, he had sent me a letter that he had already started writing. He told me about his side of the story, where he was that night, that he drove by, saw this kid alone, standing on the other side of a railing about to jump, and he knew that he had to stop. When he did, he told me about how he didn't want to tell me anything that wasn't true. He just wanted to listen. He didn't want to solve all my problems because he couldn't, and he didn't know what they were anyway. He told me that he looked over the railing too, and that it made him sick to see what I could see. When I read that letter, something changed inside me, something changed that made it make sense for once. That there was somebody out there, a complete stranger, who actually cared enough about me to not only save my life in that moment, but to actually change the whole rest of my life. Because now, ever since then, working in mental health, working in advocacy, trying to help people find their voice, that's what I do. I try to be that stranger who can reach out to others. That image of the other guy telling me to jump still stays with me. And it was when thinking about both of these people, that person screaming to me to jump and this person not saying much who saved my life, that I think it actually was the stranger behind me who did something pretty profound, more than just saving my life. I think he was actually the one who pushed me that night. It was Mike who pushed me that night. I heard a story that really resonated with me that I hope will describe to you what I mean. It goes like this. A man and a woman were walking along the edge of a cliff when suddenly they heard a booming voice from the sky. And the voice said to them, "Come to the edge." Well, the man said, "We can't come to the edge. We'll fall." But the voice said again, undeterred and with more authority, "Come to the edge." The woman this time got a little bit more afraid, a little more concerned. She said, "We can't. It's too high. We'll fall." And the voice said again, ignoring their pleas, "Come to the edge." So they came, and he pushed them, and they flew. Ladies and gentlemen, what Mike did for me that night, by pulling me back from that edge, he pushed me to do things that I never thought that I was capable of doing. That, for me, is the kindness of strangers. Thank you.